What's up, everybody? So, back at you with the next video in the series, which we're essentially going to be talking about. Well, it's going to be step number one now. Got through the introduction parts, kind of talking about how it got to this point, and then we talked about the pretty much the premise of what Not Addicted is based on, and that's those first four, which are hope, confidence, normalize, simplify. And then there's the kind of the science part of it where it's all about, changing a philosophy so that we can change our attitude, that can change our activity, which can give us new results, which all accumulates into one overall lifestyle. And so today we're finally moving into the steps, and we're going to be talking about step number one, which step number one is really the only step that I guess you could say is a direct shot at the original 12 steps. And Whereas they say that we are powerless and our lives have become unmanageable, the step that Not Addicted offers, or delivers rather, excuse me, the step that Not Addicted delivers is that, and it reads as such, that we recognize that we are powerful, number one, autonomous, number two, individuals with the power of choice and the freedom to decide our next actions. And so this step, I believe, provides kind of like the two key components of the not addicted approach, which is that recognition that we are powerful, absolutely powerful. We could make decisions, life changing, life altering decisions at the drop of a dime, just in the next second if you wanted to. If you are using right now, you could make the life altering decision right now to change that pattern. Now, it will be tough. You will have to buckle up for the ride, if you will. But at the end of the day, we have the capability of doing that. And then the second thing is that autonomous factor, and autonomous simply means independent. And so when we're talking about autonomy from the sense of not addicted in the approach, we're talking about mental autonomy, not physical autonomy, but mental autonomy. You may be physically locked up, if you will, but you could be mentally free if you want to be. And so this is that step, kind of that sort of talks about those foundations. I believe that when it comes to our inherent power and our sense of autonomy, these are things in which we give away, I believe. Um, your sense of power has been given away to us, all sorts of things, especially if you've been in treatment for a long time. One of the things it could have been given away to is this sense of disease, where any power that you have over your life you believe is not there and is non existent because all of the power you believe your life has rests with this disease. Um, from a mental health perspective, this can be giving away all of your inherent power to control your actions, to have discipline, and you're giving that away over to, let's say, disorders and compulsion, to the point where an individual gets to the point of where they're saying, for instance, well, I can't I can't do this, or I can't engage in such and such of thing because of this disorder, because of this disease. And, they may say that they get compulsive or they get impulsive at times. And kind of what this looks like in practice, if you know your power's been given away to these things, if you say things like, well, I can't focus right now because my ADHD is bad. Or I can't get out of bed because of my depression today. You know, just statements like that, or I don't want to go into that place and, engage with these people because my anxiety is really bad. These are statements that kind of show that your actions are not dictated by you, and your mental independence does not rest with yourself, but rather it rests with whatever the perceived disease or disorder you have. Um, and I think this, for me, I've always believed that the most dangerous place to be in this process is at a point of where you believe that, number one, your most powerful tool that you have, your brain, is actually working against you. And then number two, the things that you do are not actually you doing them, but are the results of these issues, whether it be, again, addiction or mental health. And so I've always said that those are two of the most dangerous places to be, in my opinion. And to me, it's not surprising, let's say, that you'd be depressed if that is what you believe. The idea that, for instance, even if I didn't want to, I could accidentally, against my will, due to compulsion or impulsiveness, um, that I could go out there and use again because of that. That's just, that's, again, that's not a good place to be, in my opinion. Nor do I think that that is the idea we should be having, when we're trying to address an addiction issue. And so that leads me to, if we're sitting here and we believe we are powerless, then what I believe we need to do is take back the power that we have given away. And so I believe you do that through a few different ways, or at least there's three things, in my opinion, that we need to, or at least from the not addicted approach, that we need to take the power back. Um, and we'll talk about some of the ways in which we would do that. And so these three things would be the power of thinking, the power of decision, and then the power of behavior. So thinking, decision, and behavior. These are the three things that I believe we give all the power away for, and we need to take that back. Coffee. Because everybody loves coffee. This is actually coffee that's from a place down here called Badass Coffee. And, I mean, I don't know if it's badass. Pretty average. It's a standard black coffee. It tastes like black coffee. But, but either way, though, so back to this, we need to get to a point of where we can take the power back from these things that we've given it away to. And I believe that the simplest way we can do this is with awareness. So, for example, the power of thinking. Number one, let's become aware of how easy it is to manipulate thinking. And right there, with that statement, I might have just proved the point. Because due to me simply saying that statement of let's become aware of how easy it is to manipulate thinking, I bet in one way or another, I got you to think about how easy it is to manipulate thinking. And again, right there is kind of my case in point. It's so easy. If I told you to, like picture a sunset right now, all right? After you picture that sunset, picture a family member. After you picture that family member, I want you to picture a piece of paper, and I want you to do it right now. And then after you picture that piece of paper, I want you to think about the worst day in your life, right? And so it's like you go through all of that, and I guarantee that for most people, you hear that. And it's like I have this kind of written out in the material because it works better when it's written out and you're reading it as opposed to me telling you to do it. But, if somebody were to follow those instructions very clearly and to the letter, they would picture a sunset. They would picture a family member. I guarantee that with that sunset and that family member, they're probably getting a relatively decent feeling going on in their mind. And then when I said, for instance, picture a piece of paper, do it now. I guarantee that most people would be like, well, why is he getting so aggressive? Because that was a bit more of an aggressive statement. And then, picture the worst day in your life. I believe most people would kind of be looking at that and saying, well, this is, we've gone from a sunset and a family member to a piece of paper and the worst day of your life. Most often, I would believe people would end at the conclusion that this really isn't making too much sense right now, which would be the exact thing that I would want you to think. And that was what I was, going for. And so all of that to just kind of illustrate that thinking is very easy to manipulate. And as Jim Rohn, who I quote throughout the material, just because he was a great thinker, he had some really good ideas. Jim Rohn would say, you need to stand guard at the doorway of your mind. It's like if you it's kind of almost an old Bible statement, if you knew that there was going to be an intruder who was going to break into your house and try to steal things, you'd be standing guard at that door expecting that intruder to come, and doing whatever you can to protect your house or protect your property. And it's kind of the same thing here. We have intruders to our minds. And then on top of that, too, some of us, we protect our house better than we protect our own mind. It's like if you get a knock on the door nowadays at your house, what do? You don't just open the door. At least I would suspect you don't. Because knocking is somebody coming up to the door knocking on is so uncommon now. But what do? If you have like a Ring camera, you hear that knock on the door, you're checking that Ring camera, you're getting on the camera and you're going through the speaker saying, what do you want? Why are you here? Who are you? Some people protect their house better than they protect their mind, where we just let whatever in. When it comes to the brain, there's nothing standing guard. And this is why, kind of that sense of autonomy is so important, that sense of independence. And also, step number 2 addresses this also, where step number 2 is we're free to think for ourselves and formulate our own opinions. This is an example of standing guard at the door of your mind. Have your own opinions about matters before you get another one. And then also recognize that nobody can think for you. That's the independence factor. Nobody can think for you. You do your own thinking for yourself. Unless, of course, every idea you have in your head is an idea that was given to you by somebody else and not an idea that you came up with on your own. This is a good symptom, if you will, that you've lost your mental independence. And I run through kind of a list of, in step 1, of specific symptoms. I believe there's 5 of them listed. Or this might be with step 2. I don't remember, but I'm going to go over them now. But I believe, it's step 1, because it's the symptoms that you've lost your autonomy. And, like symptom number 1, for instance, is if you do something bad, or you do something we could call stupid and it ends in a negative result, and your response to it as to why you did it was, I don't know, or I couldn't help myself. Or you subsequently blame the behavior on something other than you. This is a good symptom that you've lost that mental independence, because at the end of the day, you're putting the blame of what you've done on something that is not you. You're putting it on, disorder. Some people would say, well, I got triggered and this is how I acted then. Well, then your independence doesn't rest with you. It rests with the disorder. It's with the trigger. It's with, whatever you want to label there. If it's I don't know, then your independence is with essentially ambivalence. You have no clue. Well, then the question is, who does? And then if you also respond to that with I couldn't help myself, well, then the question is, well, who can then at the end of the day? If not you, if not yourself. One of the things that I kind of when I'm speaking or giving the groups and lessons about the material, one of the things that I say quite often is that you know you best, and nobody has lived your life. You are the only person who has lived in your body for the entirety that has been alive. And so if anybody's going to know what's going on with you, I would assume it is the person who has lived in that body for its entire life. It's not going to be the therapist that you sat down with for an hour and then suddenly they claim to have all of the answers for you. All right. But that's one symptom. Another symptom that you've lost your sense of independence, and these are kind of two symptoms put into one just for the sake of time. But it's when you're asked about your future actions and what you're going to do, and you say, for instance, I don't know. And so I encounter this one a lot, where it's, if somebody leaves the facility and you ask them, for instance, hey, do you think you're going to stay clean after you leave here? And their subsequent answer is, I don't know. Well, then again, that question comes up with, well, who does? One of the things that I teach throughout the program is that we don't use I don't know statements. Ultimately, we replace them with I haven't decided statements. And that's a lot different than saying I don't know. I don't know is a, bless you. I don't know. I don't know is a very ambivalent answer, right? It's a statement of uncertainty, and I kind of addressed that in it's step 5 with kind of the victim mentality and how uncertain statements reflect this idea that we are a victim ultimately, and so we want to make sure that we make statements that keep the ball in our court. That reflect the idea that we have the power, we have the decision-making ability when it comes to it. And so that's why I say if your answer is I don't know to something, it should be replaced with I haven't decided. Again, that reflects the idea that you have options. It reflects the idea that you have a choice to make, which the perception of choice is fundamental to motivation, according to motivational psychology. And so that's another symptom there. Another good one is that if every problem you believe you have had to be taught to you instead of you coming up with it or coming to the conclusion on your own. And so it's like, again, I speak to a lot of people, I meet a lot of people who at the end of the day have this litany of problems in their life, or they have these litany of problems that they believe they suffer from. And all of these problems were taught to them as opposed to them on their own coming to the conclusion that, hey, yes, I have this issue. And then another symptom that you've lost the independence would be when it comes to the solutions to those problems. So not only have you been taught about the problem, but then the solution to the problem is given to you by the same person who taught you about the problem. And this is what I call the perfect monopoly, right? If I want to ensure that, you follow a strict system, for instance, that ensures that you just keep coming back, quote unquote, I would make sure that I establish the idea that you don't know what your problems are and that you need a professional to give you the answer. And then I would proceed to give you the answer and tell you all about your problems. Again, because you don't know any better for yourself. And then on top of that, I would tell you the solution. And so I would say, hey, if you don't, as kind of, it's exactly what they do. You know, if you don't follow up with the treatment that we prescribe to you, then at the end of the day, you are going to, let's say in the addiction sense, you're going to end up relapsing. Again, on certain relapse prevention plans, it literally states that you missing a meeting is a symptom of a relapse, or you thinking that you don't need the meetings anymore is a symptom of a potential relapse. And so, you know, right there is again what I call the perfect monopoly, right? So if you're sitting there, that's a great symptom that you have lost your sense of autonomy, your sense of your own mental independence, because every idea you have about yourself is an idea that had to be taught to you. And then every solution that you have to every problem that you've got also had to be taught to you. And so essentially you end up living a prescribed life in a way given to you by your professional, which is the ultimate, if you will, the ultimate loss of autonomy. Is if everything you're doing and the way that you're living, you only do because you believe that's what you have to do in order to, let's say, avoid something worse. And it wasn't you that came up with the idea, but it was an idea that was taught to you. You know, there's the perfect setup, right? And so we need to take that, essentially that power that we've given away. We need to bring it back to us. And like I said, we do this with awareness. And so we already kind of talked about that power of thinking aspect, just understanding how easy thinking is to manipulate. And also, you know, just every great, the quote goes, I can't remember, every great idea starts with a thought, right? Or every great, whether you want to say invention or every great endeavor, if you will, starts with a thought. So everything starts with thinking. And so that leads us to then, after thinking, you know, if you have something in front of you, you think about it, and then you make a decision. And so awareness of decisions is a major one here. And the way that I like to put it is that every single day, we are faced with millions of options of what we could do. You know, it's like I'm sitting in a Airbnb apartment thing right now, a condo, if you will. And there are many options of what I could be doing right now that, you know, are within my ability to decide to do. And so, for instance, there's a gas stove. If I wanted to, I could choose to turn on every single burner. Why the hell not? You know, I could choose to do that, and I could choose to let them go all night if I wanted to. That'd be a little scary, right? It probably wouldn't be recommended, but at the end of the day, I have the ability to decide to do that. There's a microwave. If I wanted to, I mean, look, bananas right in front of me. Why not put some bananas in the microwave? Why not? It's within my ability to decide to do. But yet, I'm not going to do that because I think that would just be stupid. And I don't know how well that would turn out. But it's kind of just highlighting this point that, you know, every single day we have thousands of decisions that we could make and of varying degrees. But yet, we often find ourselves making similar types of decisions over and over and over and over and over again, even though we're faced with all of these different types of options. And it's just being aware of that. You know, I think one of the biggest things that can help reestablish the idea that you are the decision maker in your life and you are in control of your actions, no matter how much you've been told you're compulsive, no matter how much you've been told you're impulsive, no matter how much you've been told that your life is dictated by disorder and disease. We can see all of these different areas in our lives where we have, full decision control, and disease and disorder are irrelevant to that. It's just like, pay attention to the next time, I don't know, let's say the next time you get hungry. What do you decide to go and eat? Why, for instance, do you decide, hey, I'm going to go to maybe I'll go to an Applebee's instead of McDonald's? Why did you decide to do that? You'll notice that there was thinking that happened beforehand. And you'll notice that, okay, you thought about it, and Applebee's sounds better than McDonald's. And so let's go to Applebee's, right? What about the first thing you do when you get up in the morning, right? There's a good example, too. Do you decide you decide when you want to get up, number one, whether you set an alarm clock, whether you decide to hit the snooze button, or whether you decide to get up as soon as that first alarm goes off. That's in your camp of decision. And then what's the first thing you do? Do you get ready? Do you go to the bathroom? Do you brush your teeth? What do you do? Do you make a cup of coffee? All of these things are decisions that we make out of various different types of options. I believe this is the universal reality. It's not just a specific reality, if you will, where it's just specific to certain things. I believe all the time of every day, of every moment of every day, we have these types of decisions that we can make, and we are constantly choosing between our various options that we know we have. And so once you start seeing that day in and day out, it kind of gets you in the spot of where you are. It's almost kind of bittersweet, because what this does is it eliminates every excuse. When you realize this, it means there are no excuses for you if you knew that you were fully aware of all these other things you could have done. But this is what kind of brings that power back in the realm of decision. Recognizing that every moment of every day, you are constantly making a decision between various options of things you could do. And then that leads to that third one, right? So you have the power of thinking, the power of decision, and now the power of behavior. And this is very simple. Watch what happens after you have thought about it, after you have decided on it. Ultimately, then what happens? Behavior follows, right? Let's say you're going out to eat, you got this food on your plate, and you're looking at the food, and you know what you're thinking? Well, here's something that I don't like on this plate. Your decision, I'm going to decide not to eat that. Your behavior that follows then is you eat everything else on the plate other than the thing you decided not to eat. Now, what I think the mental health world does in a lot of cases, and the addiction world, the treatment world, what they do is they say, well, yeah, you decided not to eat that certain item on that plate, but you know what? You compulsively and impulsively, despite your decision, well, you ate it anyway. Because your behavior ultimately is out of your control, and it is up to just this impulsivity and compulsivity from disorder and disease in your brain. And we would look at that and we would say, well, that's a ridiculous thing to say at the end of the day. Nobody looks at their plate and says, hey, I decided not to eat this item on this plate over here, but then I accidentally did. Nobody says that, but at the end of the day, we say that all the time in the treatment world. We say that all the time, especially when it comes to addiction. I'm just saying that, look, the same type of system that happens when you say, hey, or when you think about that item of food, you decide not to eat it, and then you behave accordingly. That is the same way we should be treating addiction. It's the same way we should be treating these mental health issues. just recognizing that that ability is there, present all the time. And technically, I don't think anyone is impulsive or compulsive. I believe that we all have a justification in our minds about why we've done what we've done. And if you have a justification for it, well, then that means you've thought about it. And that means that you could have thought to do something different, but you didn't. And the responsibility for that falls on nobody but you. And so at the end of the day, while we do sit here and, a part of the approach is taking the responsibility for the things we do, and even though that's admitting to guilt, that we deliberately did these things, it's also the powerful stance to take, because it's only going to help you when you decide to change it. If at the end of the day, I believe, for instance, I'm responsible for my using, then that means I'm responsible for my clean time, my sobriety. If I believe that every time I used was a deliberate decision of mine, then that means every day that I stay clean is a deliberate decision of mine. And there's no room for accidental relapses. There's no room for getting triggered, and I couldn't help myself. And that's the kind of thing, that's the power, if you will, that we need to get back. And that's what this first step is about, is reclaiming that type of power. And again, just kind of taking the personal responsibility for this stuff. And so that ultimately is step one there. If you have the electronic material, there's a section of it that I encourage you to read. It's just called the filter part. It's where kind of dive down into the science behind reactionary and responsive thinking. We have automatic thoughts that pop up, and then we have our responses to those automatic thoughts. And all of the power for us in that thinking realm lies between the reactive thought and the responsive thought. And so I've reached my half-hour mark, and so I don't want to go too much further into it per se with that, because that's a whole nother, probably another hour-long discussion there. But I think that's pretty much all I have for you on step one. And so I'll be back with a step two video pretty soon. And so I hope y'all have been having a Merry Christmas. This is technically December 25th. And for those of you who have been struggling with addiction, if you still are, the good news is there's plenty of hope out there. Addiction is substance use disorders are the most highly remitted of all mental health issues. And so there's a lot of hope out there, and more people than not. There are more clean people who have had problems with addiction than there are current addicts. And so, the chances are much greater than we think with this stuff. And it's just important to maintain that type of hope. So, until next time, thank you, and we'll see you soon.